My name is Avery Cole, and 3 months ago I learned exactly how far my own family would go to take something that wasn't theirs. My parents sued me because I refused to hand over my brand new apartment to my sister. They walked into court acting like I had stolen from them, not the other way around. They were certain I'd lose after all they'd spent my entire life treating her like the sun and me like background noise. But what they didn't expect was that I had proof. Real proof. The kind that doesn't break under pressure. The kind that exposes every lie they built their case on. Because when someone started damaging the walls, the locks, and the wiring inside my apartment, hoping to scare me into giving it up, they didn't realize they were being recorded the entire time. I still remember the moment I opened that footage. I remember the breath leaving my chest not from shock, but from clarity. Everything they'd planned was collapsing right in front of them, and they had no idea the ground beneath their feet was already cracking. They thought they were dragging me into a corner, but they were walking straight into the one trap they set for themselves. And trust me, when the tables finally turned, they turned hard. Before I tell you exactly how everything unfolded, make sure to subscribe and stick with me. You're going to want to hear how this ended because even I didn't expect the final blow. But to understand why they sued me, you'd have to go back years to the version of my family most people never saw. I grew up in the Cole household with Gregory Cole as the father who believed authority was something you used like a hammer, and Karen Cole as the mother who believed softness was a tool to shape people into whatever she wanted. And then there was Madison Cole, the daughter they wrapped in bubble wrap from the moment she could walk. While other kids were learning responsibility, Madison was being taught she deserved anything she reached for. My childhood was a long list of chores, expectations, and invisible obligations. Gregory made sure I carried the weight of whatever he thought a good child should be. If something broke, I fixed it. If a bill was late, I picked up extra shifts. If Madison cried, he demanded I apologize before he even asked what happened. Karen had a different technique. She didn't yell. She whispered disappointment so sharply it cut deeper than shouting ever could. Every time Madison made a mess or caused a scene, Karen turned to me with that familiar line, "Avery, your sister is sensitive. Help her." It wasn't a request. It was a command disguised as care. By the time I was 15, I was working weekends at a small HVAC repair shop a few blocks from home. The owner, Mr. Benson, paid me barely enough to matter, but I kept the job because the house needed money. Gregory never said thank you. He just said things like, "That's what family does," which always meant you do it, and Madison doesn't. Meanwhile, Madison drifted through childhood like rules were optional. If she shattered a vase, she'd gasp dramatically and point at me before even thinking. Karen never questioned it. Gregory never corrected her. And I always ended up cleaning the shards. When I was 17, Madison borrowed my old laptop without asking and spilled a full cup of juice on it. Instead of being grounded, she cried into Karen's shoulder until they decided I should have kept my things in safer places. It was the same pattern over and over. Madison acted, I absorbed. The turning point came the year I graduated high school. I told Gregory I wanted to leave Oklahoma for a work-study program in Colorado. He looked at me like I'd announced betrayal. "So you're abandoning your family?" he asked. What he meant was, "Who's going to handle everything if you go?" Karen wasn't far behind with her soft-voiced guilt. "Madison will miss you. Don't you care about her?" I cared. I just knew staying meant never becoming more than their permanent problem solver. So I left. For the first time, I stepped into a life that was mine and mine alone. The early years were rough, small apartments, inconsistent work. Long nights balancing HVAC classes with hands-on training, but they were free. And every paycheck, no matter how small, felt like proof that I could build something without being used. I took jobs across 3 different states, traveling wherever the work was steady. I slept in rented rooms, basements, and cramped studios, saving every possible dollar. While Madison posted selfies from brunches her friends paid for, I was lying on warehouse floors repairing busted air handlers at 2 in the morning. And honestly, I preferred my world. Hard work made sense. Entitlement never had. By my mid-20s, I finally landed a stable position with a commercial HVAC company in Dallas. That job became my foundation. I saved aggressively, lived frugally, and refused to depend on anyone for anything. For the first time, my life wasn't an extension of Madison's convenience. Then came the day I held the keys to my first real home, a modern apartment in a quiet building with my name alone on the paperwork. I drove back to Oklahoma that weekend to share the news. When I placed the keys on the kitchen counter, Madison didn't congratulate me. She didn't even ask how long I'd worked for it. Her eyes went straight to the key tag, and she smiled like someone had just reminded her of a gift she'd forgotten was hers. In that moment, I finally understood something. Madison didn't see my accomplishment. She saw her future property. And she assumed I'd hand it over the moment she decided she wanted it. That afternoon, I drove over to my parents' house to share the news, hoping on some naive level that they might at least acknowledge what buying a home meant to me. As soon as I stepped inside, Madison was already perched at the dining table, elbows on the polished wood, eyes fixed on the folder in my hand, like she'd been rehearsing an expression of curiosity. When I told them I'd finally closed on my apartment, the first word out of her mouth wasn't congratulations. It was, "Where exactly is it?" in a tone that felt less like a question and more like a pre-claim. I set the folder down, and Dad leaned back in his chair with a sigh that carried the weight of expectation. "Avery, you've got steady income. You're doing well. Something like that suits your sister better right now." His voice wasn't accusatory. It was matter of fact, like this had already been decided somewhere without me. Mom followed immediately with a trembling breath, her eyes welling up the way they always did when she wanted something. "Honey, your sister's had a difficult year. She just needs a stable place to get back on her feet. It's only one apartment. Helping her once won't hurt you." Before I could respond, Madison jumped in, voice soft but dripping with strategy. "I'm not asking for anything crazy, I need a fresh start, Avery. You know I've been dealing with the breakup. Losing my job wasn't my fault either. And the market is impossible right now. A place like yours could be the beginning of a whole new chapter for me." She pressed her lips together like she was about to break down a performance I'd seen 1,000 times growing up. I kept my voice calm. "Madison, I bought that apartment with my own work. I'm not giving it away." Her face tightened, but she didn't drop the act yet. She tried again with a softer angle. "It doesn't have to be forever. Just until I'm stable. You don't even live here full-time. Why let it sit empty when I could actually use it?" Dad straightened, eyebrows lifting as if he'd found the winning argument. "Exactly, it's practical. Madison benefits and you won't even feel it." "I will feel it," I said, still composed. "Because it's mine." That's when the air shifted. Mom's expression twisted into disappointment, the sharp, guilt-soaked kind she used whenever she wanted to corner me without raising her voice. "After everything we've done for you, you can't help your own sister. She is struggling, Avery. You know that." "Mom, I'm not responsible for her life," I answered. "I worked for that apartment. I paid for it entirely. It's not up for discussion." The tremble in her voice hardened instantly. "You're being selfish? Your sister needs support, and you're turning your back on her." Dad's jaw clenched as if my refusal personally offended him. "You're acting like this family never helped you. Madison needs stability now, not excuses." I stayed steady. "And I need boundaries. The answer is no." Madison scoffed quietly, pushing back her chair just enough to signal a shift. The sweetness drained from her voice, leaving something sharp. "You don't even appreciate what you have. You always make things harder than they need to be." "It's not hard," I told her. "It's simple. The apartment is mine." Dad leaned forward, pointing a finger at the folder like it was evidence in his favor. "You need to rethink your attitude. A good daughter wouldn't let her sister struggle when she has plenty." I closed the folder and slipped it back into my bag. If you invited me here to pressure me, you've wasted my time. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You can't walk away from this conversation, she said, voice cracking. We are your family. And I'm still leaving, I replied. I headed toward the door, but before I reached it, Madison spoke again, her voice low, cold, and certain. You'll hand it over eventually. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That one sentence told me everything about what was coming. A few days later, I got a text from Aunt Marlene inviting me to what she called a small family get-together. Her message was warm, casual, almost sweet, and I didn't feel the slightest need to question it. When I pulled into her driveway that evening, though, something felt off instantly. There were no cars besides my parents' and Madison's. No lights strung up, no food laid out, no music, nothing that resembled a gathering. When I stepped inside, the living room was dead silent, and every chair had been dragged into a perfect circle like some kind of intervention. Every relative who had always taken Madison's side was seated, waiting, their faces stiff with a rehearsed seriousness. Madison sat in the center of the circle, wrapped in a blanket as if she were recovering from some grand tragedy. It was painfully theatrical, but not one person looked embarrassed. Before I could even ask what was going on, my father gestured toward an empty chair. Sit, he said, like it was an order, not an invitation. As soon as I sat down, the speeches began. My mother leaned forward, hands clasped dramatically, voice trembling with an emotion she clearly practiced in the mirror. Avery, your sister is going through the hardest time of her life. She needs stability. She needs compassion. She needs a place to stay. My aunt chimed in next, reading off what was obviously a pre-written line. It would mean so much to her if you stepped up. My cousin followed. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. Then my uncle. She's your only sister. Every single one of them spoke like they had been assigned a role. Madison didn't say a word. She just dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, doing her best impression of someone fragile and helpless. When they finally finished their rotation, my father straightened his back and gave the real reason they had all been summoned. Your sister should have the apartment, he declared. It's time for you to stop being selfish. My mother nodded fiercely. You're young, you have a job, you can find another place. But she's struggling. This is your chance to do something meaningful. It was absurd. They weren't asking, they were cornering. They were staging an emotional ambush. I stayed silent for a few seconds, letting them think they had control of the conversation. Then I spoke calm and steady. This apartment was bought with my money, my savings, my work, not yours, not hers. My father scoffed loudly. Oh, please, family helps family. I nodded. Exactly. Which is why I won't let a grown adult manipulate an entire room into guilt-tripping me. This is not compassion. This is entitlement. Madison lowered her tissue just enough for me to see her glare. My mother slammed her hand on her thigh. Avery, why are you being so cruel? She needs this. No, I replied. She wants it. And so do you. That's the difference. The room turned hostile instantly. Accusations flew at me from every side, ungrateful, cold-hearted, selfish, dramatic. I kept my voice even. You can call me whatever you want. The answer is still no. I stood up from the chair. My dad barked out. Sit down, we're not done. I am. I answered, already walking toward the front door. As I stepped outside, my phone buzzed in my pocket. When I checked it, I froze, not out of fear, but because the sender was the one person who never got involved in the family mess, Elena Brooks. Her message was short, urgent, and completely unexpected. There's something you need to see. And just like that, the fake family meeting wasn't the real ambush her message was. Elena's message opened a whole group chat I never knew existed, and the moment I scrolled through the threads, something inside me went still. It wasn't just the three of them talking, it was the way they talked, the tone, the plotting, the absolute confidence that they could manipulate me like a child. The chat included Gregory, Karen, and Madison, and every message read like they were rehearsing for a stage play, where I was the villain and Madison was the fragile heroine. Gregory wrote long paragraphs about guiding me toward the right decision. Karen suggested lines she thought would guilt me faster, and Madison sent voice notes complaining about how unfair it was that I got an apartment while she was suffering through a difficult phase. What really twisted my stomach was a set of messages from 2 nights before the intervention. Karen had written, "We need to make it emotional. If he feels like the whole family is united, he'll cave." Madison replied, "He always folds if we push hard enough." And then Gregory added, "If he doesn't hand it over, we move to legal pressure." Another thread was even worse. I saw Madison complaining about wanting a fresh start in a place that actually looks like something, and Gregory replying, "He won't fight if we frame it right." Karen wrote, "I'll cry. That always gets to him." And then the sentence that made my skin crawl, "If he refuses, we sue." Courts love a struggling daughter. I stared at those words for a long time. It wasn't shock. It was clarity. Cold, sharp, sobering clarity. They never cared about helping Madison. They cared about controlling me. I called Jordan as soon as I gathered myself. She picked up before the second ring. "Talk to me," she said, and I sent her every screenshot. She didn't say a word for a full 30 seconds, and when she finally did, her tone had shifted into her professional mode. "This changes the entire case. We're not just responding, we're countering hard." The next morning, she filed an immediate response to the lawsuit my parents had submitted, dismantling each claim one by one. Their lawsuit revolved around a supposed verbal agreement where I promised to give Madison the apartment. Except they had no recording, no messages, nothing that resembled proof. Jordan sent their attorney a concise but brutal request for documentation to support the alleged agreement. They stalled, dodged, and tried to redirect, but every attempt made them look worse. Meanwhile, Jordan had me gather everything tied to the apartment: the contract, the wire transfers, the receipts for inspections, closing costs, even the proof of income I used to qualify for the loan. She compiled it all into a detailed packet showing the apartment was bought entirely with my money. No gifts, no loans, no shared ownership, nothing they could twist. For days, the exchanges between the lawyers went back and forth. Their side kept trying to build a narrative out of thin air, but every time they tried to imply parental contribution, Jordan snapped back with a request for proof they didn't have. When they attempted to argue I had a moral obligation, she reminded them, moral arguments hold no legal weight. It became obvious they thought intimidation alone would make me hand the apartment over. They never expected someone to fight back with actual law. One evening, after Jordan sent me an update confirming their claims were weakening, I drove to the apartment feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not happy, just grounded. Solid. I unlocked the door, ready to drop my things and decompress, but the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't dramatic, just a quiet, wrong stillness. The air felt different, heavier, as if someone had been there recently. A faint scuff mark near the entryway caught my eye, one I knew hadn't been there before. Then I noticed the slightest shift in the rug, the edge lifted just enough to look disturbed. And the lock, when I turned it again, clicked strangely, like it had been tampered with. My chest tightened. Someone had been here. Someone who wasn't supposed to be. That night, when I returned to the apartment to examine the lock more closely, I noticed fresh scrape marks around the keyhole that hadn't been there before, as if someone had pried at it with something sharp. The realization hit me hard enough to make my pulse spike, and I went straight to the small console drawer where I kept the security system controls. I pulled up the camera feed, rewound the footage, and within seconds my breath stalled. The video showed Madison entering the building with her hood up, glancing around the hallway like she was checking for witnesses. Then she crouched in front of my door, pulled a thin metal tool from her bag, jammed it into the lock, and forced it open before slipping inside. The angle from the entryway camera caught everything, her rifling through my belongings, shoving things off shelves, scraping the walls with something metallic, tearing into my mail, yanking fixtures loose like she was trying to make the place look unlivable. Her face was fully visible the entire time. The footage was painfully clear, and there was no way she could deny it. I downloaded the video, immediately saved 2 copies on separate drives, and emailed one to Jordan. Then, with my hands still shaking, I forwarded the same clip directly to the local precinct's evidence line. My phone started ringing less than an hour later. It was Gregory. Before I could decide whether I wanted to pick up, he called again, and then again. I finally answered on the 4th attempt. His voice was strained but forcedly gentle. "Avery, let's talk about this," he said as if nothing outrageous had happened. "We don't need police involved." Before I could reply, Karen grabbed the phone and launched into a desperate plea. "Let's be reasonable. We'll withdraw the lawsuit. No more fighting. We can share the apartment. Maybe 2 weeks each," I almost laughed. Their tone had shifted from condescending certainty to panicked bargaining in less than a day. "No," I said flatly. "The lawsuit stays. The report stays. And the apartment remains mine." Karen inhaled sharply. "Avery, don't be vindictive." "I'm being factual," I replied. The call ended abruptly. 2 days later, the court date arrived. Madison walked into the courtroom wearing a pastel sweater, hair loosely curled, eyes already glossy with fake tears. She clutched a tissue like it was a lifeline, glancing dramatically at the judge every few seconds. Her attorney began with a long speech about her vulnerability, emotional distress, and hope for a stable home. Madison sniffled loudly at all the right moments. Then, it was Jordan's turn. She rose from her seat with the calm confidence of someone who already knew how this would end. "Your Honor, we have evidence that directly contradicts the plaintiff's statements." She connected her laptop to the courtroom screen, pressed play, and the moment Madison appeared breaking into my apartment, you could feel the air tighten. Madison's face went pale instantly. Her attorney froze. Gregory shifted in his seat and Karen covered her mouth like she might faint. The judge paused the video halfway through. "Is this you?" he asked Madison. She stammered through a weak denial, something about bad lighting, wrong angle, misunderstandings, but the footage was crystal clear. Jordan didn't interrupt. She waited. The judge restarted the video, letting the rest play. Madison scraping the walls, pulling down decor, tossing items across the room, and then leaving with a satisfied smirk. The moment the screen went dark, the judge leaned back with a slow, measured breath. "Given the severity of what we've just watched," he said, "I want all cameras pulled from every angle for the full time span in question." Madison went rigid. She knew exactly what that meant. The footage we showed wasn't the only camera in the apartment, and she had no idea what the other angles had captured. The judge reviewed the last frame of the footage before turning to his clerk and announcing his decision with a firmness that silenced the entire courtroom. He dismissed the lawsuit in its entirety, declaring that the claims against me had no legal foundation. Then he continued, stating that my parents and Madison were responsible for covering all attorney fees generated by the case, a number Jordan later estimated would reach well into the tens of thousands of dollars once everything was finalized. Madison's situation grew worse as the judge listed the civil repercussions for her break-in. Because the video showed intentional damage to property, forced entry, and deliberate tampering with fixtures, she was issued a civil citation for property destruction under state law. It meant she now had a record not criminal, but serious enough to appear on background checks and substantial enough to complicate future job applications. She also received a mandatory restitution order requiring her to reimburse every dollar needed to repair the apartment, including the locksmith's work, the paint restoration, the replacement of the broken decor, and the evaluation fee for the damaged wiring. Her attorney attempted to argue that Madison had acted under emotional stress, but the judge cut him off, stating that emotional stress did not justify unlawful entry or vandalism. When court adjourned, my parents tried approaching me in the hallway, but I walked right past them. Their calls echoed behind me, each one laced with a desperation I had never heard from them before. They wanted a private conversation, a chance to rewrite the narrative again, but I wasn't interested. After what they had done, there was nothing left to salvage. The next morning, I met with an officer at the precinct and filed for a protective order. Given the footage and the pattern of harassment that Jordan outlined in her supporting statement, the order was granted temporarily on the spot and later upheld in full after a judge reviewed the evidence. It barred Madison Gregory and Karen from approaching my apartment, my workplace, or contacting me through any method. That same week, I packed what I could into 3 storage bins and made arrangements with a realtor in a different neighborhood. A month later, I moved into a quiet complex on the opposite side of the city, somewhere with tall trees a good distance from my former life, and a sense of peace I hadn't realized I'd been missing. Signing the new lease felt like closing a door I should have shut years earlier. In the weeks that followed, the silence from my family was strange at first. No calls, no texts, not even an email. Their absence felt like removing a weight I had carried so long that I hadn't noticed how much it had been dragging me down. Jordan called one afternoon to confirm that the restitution payment had been processed and that the protective order was officially active for the maximum period allowed by state law. After we hung up, I sat alone in my new living room surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, and realized how deeply I had underestimated the cost of staying tied to people who believed they owned parts of my life. It wasn't grief, I felt it was relief, clean and sharp. I finally understood something I had ignored for too long. Family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, boundaries, and a willingness to protect one another instead of tearing someone down the moment they succeed. Moving forward, I knew one thing for certain. Some families aren't a place you return to, they're a limit you learn to set. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is close the door, lock it, and never hand over the key again.